The message came in while I was reviewing quarterly numbers with my assistant. I think we need time apart. I'm moving in with someone else. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. No name. No explanation. Just those 19 words. I stared at the screen, blinking once, twice, before placing my phone face down and calmly asking Sophia to bring in the final invoices from marketing. She didn't notice anything. That was the point. My name is Julia Hartman, and I've always been composed. Even when my world starts to crack. My now ex-husband's name is Daniel. We'd been married for 9 years, together for 11. He'd been my college sweetheart, my rock when I started my company, and, ironically, the one who told me my best friend Harper was jealous of our relationship. Turns out he was just projecting. It wasn't until after 6 p.m. that I let myself break character. I locked my office, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. My body didn't shake, my eyes didn't water. Not yet. But my mind was screaming. I checked the message again. The timestamp was 12:13 p.m. So while I was preparing for our biggest acquisition to date, he was packing his bags to move in with Harper. Harper and I had known each other since high school. She'd been my maid of honor. She held my hair back the night before my first investor pitch when I got so anxious I threw up in the hotel sink. She knew everything about me. Apparently, Daniel too. I scrolled further. Another message arrived an hour later. Don't be dramatic. I'll send for the rest of my stuff next week. He was right about one thing, I wasn't going to be dramatic. I was going to be surgical. I pulled out the folder labeled Contingency Plan Alpha from my locked drawer. Yes, I had a folder. Because Daniel had been acting differently for months, canceling dinner plans, turning his phone screen away, suddenly becoming too tired for intimacy. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew. 3 weeks earlier, I quietly hired a private investigator. Within 10 days, I had the photos. Parking lot embraces. Hotel room receipts. Harper's arm linked through his at a private wine bar. Her lipstick on his cheek in one of the candids. I had said nothing. Not yet. Instead, I updated my will, rewrote the corporate ownership structure, and moved $500,000 into a separate business trust, just in case. Daniel had always laughed at how paranoid I was about financial independence. What's mine is yours, he'd say. But what was mine stayed mine. The final straw had come 2 days before that text. I overheard Harper on speakerphone in Daniel's office while he was in the shower. I'd walked past the cracked door and froze when I heard my name. She suspects something, Harper whispered. She looked at me weird last night. Daniel laughed. She's just uptight. Trust me. She has no idea. He was wrong. That night, after finishing the invoices and closing my laptop, I poured myself a glass of red wine. The expensive kind. The kind Daniel always said was a waste to open unless it was a special occasion. This was one. I toasted the silence. To new beginnings. To endings I didn't ask for but was ready for. Tomorrow, Daniel would discover what it feels like to lose more than just a wife. He was about to lose everything. The next morning, Daniel made his move. He emailed my assistant to let her know he'd be coming by to collect a few personal items from the office. He had no official role at my company, but over the years I'd let him use a spare desk, told people he was consulting for our expansion into real estate, just to let him feel useful. It was adorable. And completely unnecessary. Like most of Daniel's ideas. Still, I told Sophia to be polite when he came by. I didn't want a scene. He showed up 2 hours later, wearing one of the leather jackets I bought him for his birthday. The one he said made him feel dangerous. His beard was trimmed tighter than usual, his smile smug as he strolled into the building, like he was walking away from a fire he lit himself. You look well, he said when he saw me in the hallway. I returned the smile with one of my own. Cool. Distant. Deadly. So do you. Guess Harper's couch is working wonders for your posture. He blinked but said nothing. I motioned toward the guest office. Your things are in a box. Security will walk you out when you're done. Let them know if you need help carrying it. I didn't wait for a response. That afternoon, I forwarded the folder of photos from the private investigator to my lawyer, along with Daniel's text messages. We'd signed a prenup when we married, but Daniel had pushed to add a fairness clause, a section stating if either party was found to have committed adultery, the prenup would be void. His idea. He called it insurance against betrayal. Oh, the irony. My lawyer called 20 minutes later, practically giddy. This is gold, Julia. You've got him cornered. Not yet, I said. But I will. Daniel's next move was as pathetic as I predicted. By Thursday, he'd filed for divorce himself, likely thinking he was being strategic. His paperwork made no mention of adultery, no mention of asset separation, and listed his address as a temporary residence. The audacity. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I booked a flight to Seattle. Daniel didn't know I'd been in talks to purchase Chambers & Knox, a mid-size real estate investment firm he'd once tried to get hired by. They turned him down after a disastrous interview he never told me about. But I knew. I knew everything. Chambers & Knox had been struggling financially, and I saw an opportunity. My company had been planning to diversify, and a quiet acquisition would serve both our interests, and mine especially. The deal was nearly done. I just had to sign the final paperwork. Once the merger was complete, I'd own the company Daniel had once begged to work for. And I had one specific request in the acquisition terms. A full audit of all applications, past and present, including flagged candidates for HR violations. Daniel's name would be at the top of that list. Back home, Daniel sent another text. I know you're upset. But maybe we can keep things civil. No need for revenge. I still care about you. Just not the same way. I didn't answer. I screenshot it and filed it in my folder titled, The Fall of Daniel Hartman. Let him think I was quiet because I was hurt. Let him believe he was still in control. Let him dig his hole a little deeper. It took 3 weeks for the acquisition to close. 3 weeks of silence from me. 3 weeks of Daniel sending occasional texts that swung wildly between smug and sentimental. Hope you're doing okay. Harper and I are thinking of getting a place together. Just checking in. Don't be cold. You always took things so personally. We could have been partners. You threw it away. I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, I bought a new pair of heels, black stilettos, sleek and sharp, because I knew exactly what kind of entrance I'd be making very soon. On Monday morning, Chambers & Knox held their all-hands meeting to announce the acquisition. I flew in early, walked into their glass conference room like I owned the place, because now I did. There were polite claps, hushed whispers, curious eyes. Their former CEO made a brief speech about fresh leadership, and then it was my turn. Some of you may know me as the founder of Hartman & Company. What you may not know is that I'm also a strong believer in second chances, for businesses. For people? That depends. I let the words hang in the air. I saw the HR director shift uncomfortably. Good. Today marks a new chapter for Chambers & Knox. A cleaner chapter. One where certain names no longer belong on the applicant list, let alone in our network. I nodded toward the compliance officer, who understood immediately. Behind the scenes, Daniel's flagged application had triggered a review of his entire interaction with the company. He'd applied twice over the past 2 years, and the second time had included a referral letter forged from someone who didn't even work there anymore. That, plus his prior conduct at his old job, which Harper had gossiped about online without realizing it could be traced, was more than enough for a formal blacklisting. Effective immediately, Daniel would be banned from ever applying or working with the firm, or any of its partners. Several major firms in the city. That same afternoon, I sent him an email. Just one line. We don't hire liars. Good luck. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. What did you do? They told me I'm blacklisted. What the hell, Julia? I didn't reply. I just forwarded the email to my lawyer. 2 days later, Harper showed up at my office. She looked rattled. She asked to speak privately. I declined. I just want to clear the air, she said, standing stiffly in the lobby. Daniel said you've been interfering. I smiled. Funny. He interfered with my marriage. I'm just closing loops. You're being petty. No, I said softly. I'm being strategic. There's a difference. Her cheeks flushed red. I loved him, she said. No, I corrected. You wanted to win. He was just the game piece. She stood frozen for a second, trying to muster something clever, then walked out quickly. The receptionist watched her leave, then looked at me. Should I block her number if she calls? No need, I said. They're both blocked. In every way that matters. Daniel didn't take the blacklisting well. He started posting cryptic messages on social media, vague, sad boy quotes about betrayal, fake people, and jealous exes. The kind of posts that beg for attention without saying anything real. But the real unraveling came a week later, when he lost his contracting gig with a smaller firm tied to Chambers and Knox. Word travels fast in this industry, especially when your name is flagged in an internal ethics bulletin. Harper, according to a mutual friend, was not thrilled. Did you have to burn his career down? My friend asked over brunch. I stirred my coffee. He lit the match. I just handed him the gasoline. That Friday I met with my lawyer. Divorce proceedings were moving quickly, helped by the adultery clause Daniel had so generously insisted on years ago. His texts, the photos, even Harper's social posts made it clear, the violation was undeniable. I'd be walking away with everything that mattered. The downtown condo, mine. The investment account he thought I didn't know about, already frozen. The vacation property in Aspen, laughably also in my name. All legally clean, all documented. Daniel had always been sloppy with details. He liked shiny things, not fine print. The only real wrinkle came in the form of a threat. Daniel left a voicemail I played for my lawyer word for word. You think you've won? This isn't over. I'll go public if I have to. You're not some perfect queen, Julia. People should know what you're really like. My lawyer chuckled. He's threatening defamation? After everything we've collected? Should I be worried? Only if he somehow finds a shred of evidence that you committed fraud, adultery, or financial misconduct, and we both know you didn't. She paused, then added with a grin, in fact, you might want to keep that voicemail. It sounds a lot like intimidation. I did. And I sent a copy to Daniel's attorney. The next day, I received a very polite email from his lawyer, requesting we de-escalate and prioritize privacy. Translation? He knew they were cornered. Meanwhile, my company thrived. The Chambers and Knox merger had gone smoother than expected, and our quarterly growth was the highest on record. I was invited to speak on a business panel titled Founders Who Finish Strong. I said yes. The night before the event, I walked past the mirror in my hallway. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked sharper, smarter, unbreakable. Daniel had once told me I was too cold when I worked late nights or missed date nights to hit deadlines. But maybe that chill had saved me. Maybe it wasn't coldness. Maybe it was clarity. The final court hearing was scheduled for Monday. Daniel would be there, likely in the same blazer he always wore to interviews, slightly too tight, slightly too confident. But I'd be there too. With evidence. With records. With composure. He started our war with a text message. I would end it with a judgment. And after that? I had plans. Big ones. Because when a woman stops cleaning up a man's messes, she has time to build empires. The courtroom was colder than expected, not just the temperature but the mood. Daniel sat across from me at the petitioner's table, his lawyer whispering something urgently in his ear. He looked tired. Not just underslept, exposed. The kind of exhaustion that happens when the lies can't hold up their weight anymore. I wore navy. Clean, pressed. Minimal jewelry. Just the watch Daniel gave me 5 years ago, the one he tried to take back during early negotiations. I kept it for this exact moment. Let him look at it and remember what he lost. The judge entered. Calm. Professional. Female. I liked that. Daniel's lawyer started with a plea for reasonable division of assets. She painted Daniel as someone who had supported my business emotionally, had sacrificed his own ambitions to help me grow, and that despite his recent mistake, he deserved a fair shot. It was a decent performance. But I brought receipts, literal ones. My lawyer stood and presented the adultery clause, the photographic evidence, the financial discrepancies, and the forged referral letter Daniel had submitted to Chambers and Knox. By the time she finished, Daniel was slouched in his seat, his face flushed with humiliation. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Hartman, is there anything you'd like to add?" I stood. Calm. Clear. My business was built from the ground up. I never once used joint assets to fund it. I have tax records to prove that. The property in Aspen was purchased with my personal inheritance. The condo was a birthday gift from my parents, deeded in my name. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. And while my husband was cheating on me with someone I considered family, I was negotiating the acquisition of a company he lied to for a job. Silence. My only request is that the court honor the contract we both signed, the one that protected us in case of betrayal. The one he insisted on including. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you. The ruling was swift. All properties remained in my name. Daniel was ordered to vacate the Aspen house within 10 days. He received no claim to the business. He was granted his personal vehicle and any items he could prove he purchased with individual funds. He opened his mouth, but the judge cut him off. "Mr. Hartman, I strongly advise you to accept the terms. You entered this marriage with eyes wide open and unfortunately also exited it with them closed." I looked at him for the first time since the hearing began. His hands were shaking. As we stepped outside, Daniel followed behind me. "Julia," he called out. I stopped, turning just slightly. "Yes." "You planned this. You've been waiting for me to mess up." "No," I said. "I was just paying attention. You thought I'd fall apart when you left. You thought I'd beg. You thought you were irreplaceable." I turned fully now, locking eyes with him. "You were wrong on all three." Back in the car, I opened a message from Chambers and Knox. The merger had finalized. Our valuation had doubled. And they'd voted to name me executive chairwoman of the newly formed entity. I smiled. He took my heart and stomped on it. I took his career, crushed it cleanly, and walked away with power, peace, and the last word. 6 months after the judgment, my name was featured on the cover of Forbes Women. The headline read, "The CEO who turned betrayal into billion-dollar strategy." It wasn't about Daniel. It wasn't about Harper. It was about me, finally. The article covered the story of how I'd built Hartman and Company. From the ground up, navigated a high-profile acquisition, and tripled the company's value after absorbing Chambers and Knox. My face was everywhere that week. I got offers to speak at conferences, panels, even a book deal. I turned down the memoir. I wasn't interested in writing about my pain. I was too busy living my power. Daniel, on the other hand, had become a ghost. Mutual acquaintances told me he was crashing at his older brother's house, working as a freelance consultant for startups who didn't ask too many questions. His name had quietly disappeared from every firm's candidate list. His LinkedIn hadn't been updated in months. Even Harper was gone. She'd left him 3 months after the court ruling. Word was she got tired of being resented for things he destroyed himself. She'd moved to Chicago. Started dating someone new. Started fresh. Good for her. She may have stolen my husband, but she also ended up doing me the greatest favor of my life. One afternoon, I walked into my flagship office downtown. The team had redecorated for our half-year celebration, black and gold balloons, branded champagne bottles, a wall of team photos. My assistant handed me a wrapped gift with a note. "We thought you might want this framed." Inside was a print of the original text Daniel sent me. "I think we need time apart. I'm moving in with someone else." Underneath, in gold lettering, someone had added, "Thank you for the motivation." It made me laugh. Genuinely. A few days later, I stopped by a coffee shop I hadn't been to in years. A small corner spot Daniel and I used to go to on Sundays. I didn't expect to see him, but I did. He was sitting alone. No laptop. Just a half-drunk cup of coffee and a phone he wasn't looking at. He didn't see me. I stood there for a moment, watching him. The man who thought I'd crumble. Who believed leaving me would make him the winner. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just faded. I didn't go over. I didn't wave. I simply walked past the window and kept moving forward. That night, I hosted a private dinner for my executive team. We toasted to the expansion into Europe, the upcoming app launch, and our new initiative funding women-led startups. Before dessert, someone asked me, if you could change one thing about the last year, would you? I smiled. Not a thing. He thought leaving me would break me. But he didn't know I was never his to ruin. I was always my own to build.